Good afternoon. In this section, I'll be giving you a very brief preview of Chaucer's Prologue to the Canterbury Tales with specific reference to the character who is known as the Wife of Bath. The Wife of Bath begins the prologue to her tale by establishing herself as a sort of an authority on marriage merely because she has extensive personal experience. Since her first marriage at the tender age of 12, she says she has had 5 husbands. She says that many people have criticized her for her numerous marriages, most of them on the basis that Christ went only once to marriage. The wife of Bath has her own views of Scripture and God's plan. She says that men can only guess and interpret what Jesus meant when she told a Samaritan woman that her 5th husband was not her husband. With or without this bit of scripture, no man has ever been able to give her an exact reply when she asks to know how many husbands a woman may have in her lifetime. God bade us to multiply, she says, and that is the text that she has wholeheartedly endorsed. After all, great Old Testament figures, according to the wife of Bath, like Abraham, Jacob, and Solomon, had multiple wives at once. She admits that many great fathers of the church have proclaimed the importance of virginity, such as the Apostle Paul, but she reasons, even if virginity is important, someone must be procreating so that virgins can be created. Leave virginity to the perfect, she says, and let the rest of us use our gifts as best as we may. And her gift, as we see, doubtlessly, is a sexual power. She uses this power as an instrument to control her husbands, and she says it with pride. At this point in the prologue, the pardoner interrupts her. He says that he is planning to marry soon and worries that his wife will control him, as the wife of Bath describes. The wife of Bath tells him to have patience and to listen to the whole tale to see if it reveals the truth about marriage. Of her 5 husbands, she says, 3 have been good and 2 have been bad. The first 3 were good because they were rich, old, and submissive. She laughs to recall the torments that she put these men through and recounts a typical conversation that she had with her older husbands. She would accuse her husband of having an affair, launching into a tirade in which she would charge him with a bewildering array of accusations. If one of her husbands got drunk, she would claim, she said, that every wife is out to destroy her husband. She would then feel guilty and give her what she wanted. All of this, the wife of Bath tells the rest of the pilgrims, was a pack of lies. Her husbands never held these opinions, but she made these claims to give them grief. Worse, she would tease her husbands in bed, refusing to give them full satisfaction until they promised her money. She admits proudly to using her verbal and sexual power to bring her husbands into total submission. It is a critical commonplace to assume that the text of the wife of Bath's prologue is based in the medieval genre of allegorical confession. In a morality play, a personified vice, such as gluttony or lust, confesses his or her sins to the audience in a life story. The wife is exactly what the medieval church saw as what one would call, in Chaucer's time, a wicked woman, and she is proud of it, she says, from the very beginning, as her speech was full of undertones of conflict that she had with the patriarchal society. Because the statements that the wife of Bath attributes to her husbands were taken from a number of satires published in Chaucer's time, which half comically portrayed women as unfaithful, superficial, evil creatures, always out to undermine their husbands. Feminist critics have often tried to portray the wife as one of the first feminist characters in literature. Many of Chaucer's readers have observed that the wife of Bath's prologue and tale echo and parallel each other at several key points, particularly in reiterating the male surrender of mastery. The rapist knight surrenders mastery to the magical loathly lady just as in the prologue Alison's husbands surrender to her. One common reading of this narrative symmetry is to see the wife's tale as an exemplar of her confessional prologue. As Marshall Lister puts it, in the prologue, the wife sets out to make an example of herself in order to prove by her own experience the necessity of feminine mastery. She thus offers the tale as a counter exemplum to set in opposition to those in Janikin's book of Wicked Wives and the male misogynist tradition. Nearly all interpretations that consider these parallels assume the loathly lady figure to be the wife's analogue and the rapist knight to be the representative of all men, and thus to be an analogue both for her husbands and for the textual authority that she quits in her prologue. In this allegorical reading of the tale, therefore, this old wife is like the wife herself. Her youth vanished, having to devise some way of continuing the old dance of marriage, and life itself in no man's land between what women want and what men want. The problem that remains, especially for gender aware or feminist readings of the wife, is the tale's status as mere wish fulfillment. If in her tale, Alison is imagining herself in the dual role of powerful enchantress and beautiful young woman, she seems to betray an aging temptress's desire both to dominate men and to fulfill male desire. This interpretation of the parallels between prologue and tale also makes the tale's ending especially problematic, for if the tale is meant to illustrate and validate the wife's experientially based insight that women deserve sovereignty and mastery over men in marriage, the fact that at the tale's conclusion we are told the transformed wife proceeds to obey her husband in everything that might do him pleasance or liking, as Chaucer says, seems a striking contradiction to Alison's purpose, while the question of women's desire is eluded altogether in favor of yet another representation of male desire. Ultimately, and quite conveniently for Chaucer's knight, it would seem that Alison deconstructs the moral of her own tale, suggesting that women do not want sovereignty in marriage, after all, so much as they desire to be the objects of male desire. The parallels between prologue and tale, however, are not divided as neatly along gender lines as the wish fulfillment reading suggests. It is not so much that the wife does not know that she wants to be subject to another person's mastery, but rather that Chaucer depicts the wife's desire both as an imitation and as a model of male desire. In her prologue, Chaucer contrasts, explores, and questions such tensions as experience and authority, male and female, celibacy and sexuality. The effect of this interlacing of contradictions is to force us to examine Alison's tendency and ours to perceive these powerful subjects in limiting dialectical terms. If the wife's image of female sovereignty disturbs us, we must also question the opposing assumption of male dominance in marriage, and then the general problem of power in personal relationships. If the crass, mercantile values she espouses in her prologue offend us, we must also reject the shoddy aristocratic values she attributes to the knight in her tale, and then search for more enduring human values to replace both. And if our veracity and sexuality distresses us, what answer can we find without reverting to the opposite extreme of Paul's cold and bloodless celibacy? Alison insists on these pairs of conflicting values, but Chaucer pushes us further to provide the synthesis and to recognize the false dilemma inherent in her perceptions. Thus, the interweaving of ideas which accumulates to form her character is also a puzzle we must unravel and a process we must experience. The uniqueness of the character of the wife of Bath is that although she has certain traits in common with others, sorry, Chaucer presents her as attractive, singularly attractive at that. Our impression of her complex personality arises from an inability to categorize her as a temptress or as a bawd. Also, we are not asked to take up the usual standpoint which judges a woman's sexual behavior. The wife's sexual experience is ambiguously described as company in youth, wandering by the way, or the old dance, and offered as evidence of her estate qualifications. We can hardly accuse her of a contrived and tempting beauty, but neither are we disgusted by a withered, painted coquette or a wrinkled board. Essentially, Chaucer wishes that the wife of Bath should be a character who should be as lively, as spontaneously true to herself than possibly any other knight or any other character who is on the pilgrimage to Canterbury. And it is this prologue which therefore sustains our interest in the character of the wife of Bath more than perhaps any other character Chaucer portrays in his Canterbury Tales. Thank you.